Alright, so we've got our perspective grid of a room. Now we're going to actually start putting in details because rooms don't usually look like this. So the first thing to do is to get another sheet of paper. I laid my grid out on one sheet of paper, and then I'm going to use that as an underlay. And so I've got a nice piece of layout bond that I've set over it so I can see through and still see my grid through the paper. So I'm actually going to take some tape or drafting dots and I'm going to tape this down. And that way it won't shift around. Now if you're having trouble seeing through your top piece of paper, you can do this on a light box or an underlay. Also you can use a window sometimes too at your house on a sunny day. But usually, you know, pick a piece of paper like vellum or like this layout bond that you can see somewhat through. Tracing paper is not a good option because it's so thin and it's not going to make a nice completed drawing. But pick something that you can still see through. Alrighty, so now we're going to start creating our room, and we're going to put a little table inside of our room. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to recapture the back corner by just tracing what I've already drawn on my underlay. So I can see my vanishing points through the page. And then I just capture that wall, those walls. Alrighty, and I'm also going to go ahead and draw very lightly. I'm going to redraw my horizon line and just establish those vanishing points on the front side just so I can see them a little better. So let's see, my vanishing point right and my vanishing point left. There we go. Now, to put a box within our room, I'm going to, first of all, figure out where it would be located, how many feet is it from the left-hand wall, and how many feet is it from the right-hand wall. Interior designers, will have a floor plan to go off of, or you can actually measure, the room that you're drawing for your two-point perspective project and see, where's a table from the wall, and actually measure it. So if you establish that the table is 3 feet from the left-hand wall, we can count in on our grid. So we're going 1, 2, 3 feet, make just a little dot, and then let's go ahead and say that our table was 4 feet from the right-hand wall. So we count in 1, 2, 3, 4 feet. All right, and then let's make our table 36 inches square, and I can do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just map out a box to draw my table in. And so I'm going to go ahead and map out the box on the floor, and then we'll create the height. So it's 36 by 36. So 1, 2, 3 steps, 12 inches each makes 36 inches. I'm going to go ahead then and use my vanishing point right, and I'm going to draw one side of my box there. Okay? Now I'm going to come out 3 feet in the other direction. Once again, from my vanishing point left, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and I'm using that grid on my underlay to help me count out my inches. So there's half of my box at 36 by 36. I'm going to complete it by using my vanishing point right and my grid over here, and then shift over to the vanishing point left. Alright, so now I've got my table, I've got the box for my table established on the floor, and it's a certain distance from the right-hand wall and a certain distance from the left-hand wall, and we establish that by utilizing our grid on the floor. And now we've got to determine the height of our box. So the first thing I like to do is take my straight edge and just very lightly draw out all of the vertical corners of this box. Now these are all going to be parallel to our grid and to our back corner line. So so we really want to check ourselves as we're drawing this and make sure they stay nice and parallel. Okay, now we don't know exactly where they're going to stop at this point, but by doing those first, it's going to help us establish our box as we go. So in order to determine the height, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this leading edge, this right side leading edge, and I'm going to shoot back to the wall. Okay, right along the grid. Alrighty. And then I'm going to use the grid on the wall to measure up my height. So let's make this table 22 inches tall. Okay, 22 inches, that's 2 feet minus 2 inches. So I can count up 2 feet. Then I can just guesstimate, knowing that these boxes are 12 by 12, about where 2 inches would be. So then I'm going to make a little tick mark right there on the wall. And you can see that the grid is underneath there. Alright, so I've got 22 inches measured high there. So now I'm going to go from my vanishing point right through that little mark I made for the height on the wall, and I'm going to carry this across to my box. And see, notice because I drew those side edges, I know exactly where to start and stop my line. Okay, so I'm going to erase out then this line that goes beyond. Do it here too. See, this is another reason why we want to use an overlay, because every time we erase something, we'd be erasing our grid if we drew it right on top. So that's another reason to use an underlay. Alright, so now we've got the height of the box established on this leading right-hand side. And we can use that information to complete the whole rest of the box. So from this top corner here at the front, I'm going to line that up with my vanishing point left and draw it back to where it intersects the line here on the left-hand side. And then I erase out the excess. And then I can go back from that point to my vanishing point right and get the back side of the box where it intersects with the vertical line there. And then everything's going right, which hopefully it is. When I line up these two corners, they should go back to the vanishing point. We should have this nice little box, 36 by 36 by 22. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put a table inside that box. And we can actually use the grid on the wall back here to say if I want this table to have an inch thick top. You can go back and say, okay, that's about 2 inches, 1 inch would be about there. And go through that point on the wall from my vanishing point. There's the point on the wall. And there I've established the thickness of the top. And then just carry that around to the other side. Okay, so there's our tabletop. Now, the legs of this table are not going to be right out here on the outside edge. So what I'm going to do is actually going to map out sort of a little top view of the legs, which I'll erase out later, but that's going to help me establish exactly where the legs are going to come down because they're not right on the outer edges. So I'm going to go in here on the top and I'm going to establish where those legs are going to be and how thick they're going to be. So I'm using my vanishing point here on the left, and I'm just mapping out kind of where I want the legs of this table to be and how thick I want them to be. And notice how I'm carrying it around each side, bringing it to the front. Okay, so can you see here, each of these corners, I'll darken those in, is actually going to be sort of the top of the legs. And we'll end up erasing this information out a little bit later, but they're going to help make a much more accurate representation of a table by mapping that stuff out here at the top. All of these go back to the vanishing points. Alright, so then I'm going to go from each of these corners on the top that I just drew and bring my legs down. Now they're not going to come all the way down to this leading edge because that's on the outside and these legs are inset. So I'm going to have to establish where I want them to stop here in a moment, but I'm going to go ahead and bring them all down. Forgot the side of this one. Remember, these are all parallel to each other. Oops. So they need to stay nice and straight and parallel to the outside edge of the box. Okay, so now I just have to establish where I want these to end down here on the bottom. And one way you can do that is actually extend this leading edge right here down out to the edge of the box and bring it straight down. And where it intersects right there on the back side, that is where then this will come across. And that helps us establish where those legs come down. It can be a little tedious looking, but it's all worth it because it helps get a really accurate perspective going when you take the time to do all those little extra steps. Okie doke, so now that gives us our legs for our table. And then we're going to want to put an apron on this table. I'm going to do that by stepping in just a little bit on the leg. And then going back to my vanishing point. Same thing over here. So what ends up happening then is we see just parts of these legs. And you go in and actually erase out some of the other detail. I go in here and erase some of this out. You can use an eraser shield to stay really nice and precise and not mess things up. You can see though, a table start to emerge from what once was just a nice simple box. But that gives us a piece of furniture that works within the perspective and is situated in an accurate position within our space. And there we go.